Chapter 4. The First Love. A few nights later, Josefina sat on a stool close to the fire in the family sala. The evening air had a sharpness that warned of the wintry cold to come. Josefina curled up her toes inside her warm knitted socks. She and Clara were spinning wool into yarn. They were using lawn spindles called malacates to twist tufts of wool into one long strand of yarn as the wool spun around. Anna was putting her boys to bed. Francesca sat nearby, sewing her fancy dress, which, as Clara had pointed out, she still had not finished. Hi, welcome. Tia Dolores was at her writing desk, bent close to her work. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. Josefina loved the sound Tia Dolores' quill pen made as she wrote in the ledger she used to keep track of the weaving business. Paper and ink were precious, so Tia Dolores made her numbers small and filled every inch of every page. Papa sat nearby at the table, quietly watching her write. Josefina looked around the family sala. A piano, a writing desk, paper, pen, ink, and a ledger, she thought. Tia Dolores has brought so many new things to this room, Mama wouldn't recognize it. But Tia Dolores' things were not the only changes. Papa looked different too. His face looked less tired, as if he were not so weighed down with the sorrow as he had been. Hi, welcome. There, said Tia Dolores. She put her pen down with a pleased expression. Would you do me the honor of looking out the figures? She asked Papa. Si, said Papa. Tia Dolores brought the ledger to the table, and she and Papa looked at it together. This shows how many sacks of wool we have, explained Tia Dolores, as she pointed to a column of figures in the ledger. And this shows how many blankets I think we can weave, and this shows how many sheep we'll get when we trade the blankets. Hi, welcome. Reading from this book tonight. Papa nodded. Excellent, he said. The weaving business should do very well, God willing. I am grateful to you, Dolores. Your daughters have worked hard, she said. Si, said Papa. They weave. But you have taken care of all this. He patted the ledger. It is fortunate that you can read and write. My aunt taught me when I lived with her in Mexico City, said Tia Dolores. She thought for a moment, and then she said, and now, with your permission, I'll teach your daughters to read and write. Then they'll be able to continue the weaving business after I have left. Francesca gasped. Josefina knew that meant she was not happy at the thought of yet another new thing to do. Now they would have lessons in reading and writing on top of everything else. Tia Dolores must have heard and understood the gasp too, because she said, the lessons won't add any time to the day. I have a little speller I brought with me from Mexico City. We'll use it when we sit by the fire at night. We will be putting our evenings to very good use. Francesca spoke up boldly. I don't see the need for learning to read and write, she said. I have no time to read books, and no one ever sends me letters that have anything to do with me. Tia Dolores smiled. Ah, but soon they will, Francesca, she said. Soon your papa will be receiving letters from young men who want to marry you. Hi, welcome. Francesca sniffed. She said. I won't read them, and I'll reply to any marriage proposal by handing the young man the squash. That's true, stated Clara. She's already done it. In fact, A young man had already proposed to Francesca. She had indeed followed the old custom of giving him a squash to let him know she was not interested in marrying him. Letters proposing a marriage can be very persuasive, said Tia Dolores. Your papa won your mamma's heart with his letters. Francesca's dark eyes were flinty. Mamma could not read, she said. No, said Tia Dolores, but she always said that she loved the way your papa signed his name with such fancy flourishes. Papa laughed. I was young and foolish, he said. It was the custom to make flourishes to show what an important person you were, and to make your signature different from anyone else's. I don't bother with flourishes anymore. Please, won't you show us how you used to do it, Papa? Asked Josefina. Papa smiled, but shook his head. No, it's a waste of paper, he said. Not at all, said Tia Dolores. She handed him the pen and the green glass inkwell. Very well, said Papa agreeably. Josefina stood next to him, and Clara peered over his shoulder. As they watched, Papa wrote his name in handsome upright letters. Then, under his name, Papa made graceful swirls and carving spirals that looked like a long, lovely curl of ribbon. Oh, Papa, it's beautiful, said Josefina. She turned to Tia Dolores. Will we really learn to write like that? She asked. Si, said Tia Dolores. We'll begin tomorrow. Josefina stared at Papa's beautiful writing. Then she looked up to smile at Francesca. Surely Francesca would enjoy learning to do something as fancy and elegant looking as this. So that's the picture right there of them. But Francesca was gone. She had slipped out quietly without saying good night or waiting for Papa's blessing. Something woke Josefina in the middle of the night. It was a sound, just a small sound, but one that made Josefina sit up and tilt her head and listen hard. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, Josefina saw that Francesca was not in her bed. Quietly, so as not to wake Clara, Josefina pulled on her moccasins and wrapped herself in a blanket. She crept outside. Francesca was sitting in the courtyard. She was wrapped in her blanket too. There was no moon, but the stars were so big and bright, Josefina could see Francesca's face. It was streaked with tears. Josefina was surprised. She had not seen Francesca cry since Mamma died. Francesca, Josefina whispered as she came near. What's the matter? Go away, said Francesca fiercely. Josefina knelt down next to her sister. Are you hurt? She asked. Are you ill? Shall I fetch Tia Dolores? No, said Francesca. She spoke with such force. Josefina was startled. Hi, welcome. Her voice sounded hard as she said, I've had quite enough of Tia Dolores. What do you mean? Asked Josefina. Francesca wiped the tears off her cheeks with an impatient hand. Don't you see what's happening? She asked. Has Tia Dolores' praise for your sewing and weaving made you blind? Has she made you feel like such an important person that you don't care how she's changing everything? Nothing is the same as it was when Mama was alive. Suddenly, the bitterness left Francesca's voice. It was replaced by sadness. Every change makes Mama seem farther and farther away, she said. Every change makes me feel as if I'm losing Mama again. And oh, Josefina, I miss Mama so. So do I, said Josefina passionately. Her heart ached with sympathy for Francesca. Now, she saw why Francesca had complained about Tia Dolores. Josefina tried to make Francesca feel better. I miss Mama too, she said, but Tia Dolores is good and kind. She is only trying to help us. By changing us, said Francesca. Now she is going to make us learn to read and write. Mama didn't read or write. Mama didn't ask anyone to teach us to read or write. Reading and writing will be one more way Tia Dolores will pull us away from Mama. It'll just be one more way she'll fill our heads and our hearts so that we'll have no room left for Mama. We'll start to forget her. We've already started. Oh, Francesca, said Josefina, that's not true. But a dark fear stole into Josefina's mind. Was Francesca right? It was true that Tia Dolores had changed their lives. Josefina herself had changed. Hadn't she braved the lightning? Hadn't she learned to weave? But did Tia Dolores' new ideas and new ways mean there was no room for the old ways? Was Tia Dolores making them forget Mama? Francesca strained her shoulders. I am not going to do it, she said firmly. I won't learn to read and write. She stood up and looked at Josefina. You'll have to make your own choice, she said. Decide for yourself. Then she left. Josefina stayed alone in the courtyard. She looked up at the huge, endless black sky and felt as if she were adrift in it. The stars seemed to be all around her, above her and below her, and surrounding her on every side. Josefina felt lost. Francesca made it sound as if learning to read would be disloyal to Mama. She made it seem as if Josefina had to choose between Mama and Tia Dolores, between the old and the new. What should I do, Mama? Josefina asked, but she knew there would be no answer. The stars were as silent as stones. Usually Josefina skipped and sang all the way to the stream on laundry day. But today, she walked joylessly, thinking about the conversation she'd had with Francesca the night before. Tia Dolores was waiting for Josefina by the stream. There you are, Josefina, she said cheerfully. You're as quiet as a little shadow this morning. And where are your sisters? They're helping Carmen in the kitchen, Josefina answered. Good, said Tia Dolores. Then after we do the laundry, you will have your first reading lesson by yourself. Josefina tried to smile. Tia Dolores noticed that Josefina was not paying much attention to the clothes she was washing. She was too kind to say anything about it. They worked in an unusual silence. Hi, welcome. Tia Dolores spread a freshly washed white cloth on a bush to dry. There were already 3 other white cloths on the bush. Look, Josefina, said Tia Dolores, with laughter in her voice. There are 4 white doves perched on a rosemary bush. Josefina's face lit up for the first time that day. Oh, she said, Mama used to say that poem sometimes. She tried to recite the whole poem. Behold, 4 little white doves perched on a rosemary bush. They were, Josefina faltered. I can't remember the rest, she said sadly. Tia Dolores nodded. Don't let it trouble you, she said. She draped another cloth on the bush. Josefina sighed so deeply and so unhappily that Tia Dolores gave her a questioning look. Oh, Tia Dolores, Josefina said, full of misery. It does worry me. I can keep things that remind me of Mama in my memory box, but I can't keep her words anywhere, and I'm beginning to forget them. It makes me afraid that I'm beginning to forget Mama herself. Tia Dolores' eyes were gentle as she listened. When Josefina stopped talking, Tia Dolores dried her hands on her skirt and said, Come with me, Josefina. Josefina almost had to run to keep up with Tia Dolores' long strides. Tia Dolores led Josefina back to the house and into the family sala. Her writing desk was still there on its stand. Without saying a word, Tia Dolores opened the lid of the writing desk and pulled out a drawer. From a secret compartment in the drawer, she took a little book bound in soft brown leather. She handed it to Josefina. Very, very carefully, Josefina turned the pages of the book. She couldn't read the words, but on many pages there were little sketches. Josefina stopped when she came to a drawing of 4 white birds perched on a bush. Tia Dolores read the words on the page aloud. Behold, 4 little white doves perched on a rosemary bush. They were saying to each other, "There's no love like the first love." Hi, welcome. We're reading from this tonight. As she listened, Josefina remembered hearing Mama's own dear voice, low and lilting and full of love, saying those very words. "Your Mama didn't read or write," said Tia Dolores. "She learned this poem by hearing our Papa read it aloud to us when we were little girls. When I was in Mexico City, I made this book. In it, I wrote prayers, poems, songs, stories, even funny sayings your Mama and I both loved when we were girls. It helped me feel close to her, even though I was far away." She smiled at Josefina. "When you learn to read and write, you can look in this book anytime you like and read your Mama's words. In it, you can write things you remember her saying. This book will be a place to keep her words safe, so that you'll never lose them." Josefina smiled with tremendous relief and gladness. She felt as if she had received an answer from Mama herself about what she should do. It was as if Mama were encouraging her to learn to read and write. Francesca was wrong. Reading and writing wouldn't pull them away from Mama. It would help them remember her. "Oh, please, will you teach me to read this book?" Josefina asked Tia Dolores. "This book and any others you'd like," said Tia Dolores. Reading is a way to hold on to the past, to travel to places you've never been, and to learn about worlds beyond your own time or experience. You'll find there are many grander books than this one. Would you like to keep this little book with your memory box to be your very own? "No, gracias," said Josefina. She smiled a little smile. That wouldn't be putting it to good use. So that's Tia Dolores, that's Josefina, and then that's her mother's book. Oh, hi, how are you? I think you ought to keep it and read to all of us from it sometimes. Very well, said Tia Dolores, but may I borrow it for just a moment? Josefina asked. I'll be careful. Sí, of course, said Tia Dolores. Gracias, said Josefina. With a light heart and light feet, Josefina ran to find Francesca. She was sweeping in the kitchen. Look, Francesca, said Josefina breathlessly. She opened Tia Dolores' little book to the drawing of the 4 doves. The words on this page are Mama's poem about the 4 doves, she said. Do you remember it? Francesca thought. Just the last line, she said. I think it ends, there's no love like the first love. See, said Josefina. This whole book is filled with prayers and poems and sayings of Mama's. Tia Dolores made it. Don't you see, Francesca? When we can read this book, it will be like hearing Mama's voice. And when we can write, we can add things we remember her saying. This book will be a place to keep her words safe forever. Josefina put the book into Francesca's hands. Francesca looked at the book and smiled. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were shining. Josefina smiled back. "Come with me," she said. "Perhaps Tia Dolores will read more to us." The two sisters hurried to the family sala. "Tia Dolores," said Josefina, "Francesca would like to hear you read something of Mamma's from your book. Would you read us?" "With pleasure," answered Tia Dolores. "But first, I would like to write your names in the book." Francesca and Josefina watched eagerly, while Tia Dolores dipped her pen in the ink. "This is your name, Francesca," she said. Scritch, scratch. The pen moved across the page in the small book. "And now, I'll write your name, Josefina." "Be sure to add lots of flourishes," said Francesca, "to show what an important person she is." "I will," said Tia Dolores. She wrote, "Maria Josefina Montoya." And then that's the signature right there.